All right.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay. We're going to go ahead and let the panelists introduce themselves, kind of give a little bit of background information on them and their experience with education in the state of New Hampshire. We're going to start with Michelle.
There we go. My name is Michelle Levell, and I'm the director of Granite State Home Educators. You can find our website at thatname.org. We have approximately 14,000, pushing 15,000 members across the state. Several different social media platforms so we can help people build community wherever they are in terms of the state or what their kids need to thrive and succeed. So we put a lot of time and effort into helping people develop those customized learning plans, find community where they are, and be able to have a really fun and exciting time with their home education for their family. It's a really wonderful community. New Hampshire is very fortunate to have a very robust community. So pretty much wherever you are in the state, you'll find folks to connect with.
Awesome. All right, Kate, you want to go ahead?
Sure. I'm Kate Baker Demers. I'm the Executive Director of Children's Scholarship Fund in New Hampshire, and we run two of our school choice programs. We run a program where we offer scholarships to families that are low and moderate income, and they can use those scholarships for tuition at a private school or for homeschooling expenses. We also run our state's new Education Freedom Account program, and families can use that to really customize learning experiences for their child that are really as unique as they can think of. My website is csfnewhampshire.org, and I'm looking forward to having the conversation.
Thanks, Kate. All right, Rebecca, you're next.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Sorry, I was a little late to the meeting.
That's fine.
So I moved here from California about 10 years ago, and I have 3 kids who I've homeschooled from the start. And I live on the seacoast, and other than homeschooling my kids, my focus is mostly on connecting with the community, supporting other families in homeschooling and encouraging them to do that, finding opportunities to get them together for social things and extracurricular things. I founded Prax Village, which is a sort of co-op community of liberty-minded homeschooling families out of Dover, New Hampshire, out of our community center. That's it.
Great, thanks guys. I just want to let everyone who's listening know this is an interactive webinar, so if you have questions, feel free to ask them. You can write them in the chat if you don't want to speak out. I totally understand, and we'll be answering them as we go along. So we're going to go ahead and start with the first slide. Oh, okay. How do I educate my child in New Hampshire? So does somebody want to go over the options of what that looks like? Maybe
I can do it. I can do it if you want. So in New Hampshire, we have about 130 private schools all over the state. We have about 30 and growing charter schools, and charter schools are tuition-free public schools in New Hampshire that are not reined in by radius. So you don't have to be from a specific geographic area, right? Regularly, you would think of your public school being where you're geographically assigned, and charter schools don't work like that. They're tuition-free public schools, but that you can go to from anywhere in the state as long as you can drive there. The challenging part about charter schools is they're sometimes by lottery for entrance, and some of them can have a very high demand, and so those lotteries get extremely competitive. That's actually how I got here to running this program. I sat as the board chair of a charter school for 3 years and watched those lotteries happen, and wondering to myself, like, who's helping the rest of the kids that can't get into these lotteries? I knew there was schools all over the state and that homeschooling was an option, and that families could or wanted to do that, but just didn't necessarily have the resources to be able to do it. And so that's when I started the scholarship fund about a decade ago after having that charter school experience. But charter schools are a great option for many families. They have a lot of niches, like that school in Nashua called the Academy for Science and Design. We also have, 275 or so traditional public schools in New Hampshire where you can take a class or course, even if you're not geographically enrolled there. And so that's kind of interesting. There's a few magnet programs spattered around. And then, of course, you could be a homeschooler in New Hampshire also if you don't want to attend a building. How'd I do?
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we're going to move on to the next slide. What is the Children's Scholarship Fund?
I did a pretty good job of explaining that in the first section. We run two, so charter schools are also a form of school choice. So when I say we run 2 school choice programs, I really mean two of the 4 school choice programs that exist in New Hampshire. So I'll talk for a minute about the school choice programs we don't run. They do have some towns that have school choice available, right? We've heard about Croydon and how Croydon pays a base amount for tuition for the kids that live in Croydon to be able to choose the school that works for them. That is a school choice program that exists in New Hampshire. We also have charter schools. They are a form of school choice because, again, they're not geographically constrained, right? You can go to a charter school. If you can drive there, you can go there. Again, you have subject to those lotteries. And then our 2 other school choice programs are the ones that we run here at Children's Scholarship Fund, that scholarship program that we've been running for a decade, helping kids to pay tuition at private schools or have a homeschooling scholarship for their expenses. And then a 4th school choice program we have in New Hampshire is our new Education Freedom Account, which again, the family gets their state grant in a digital wallet and they can totally customize their experience with multiple buildings or no buildings if that's what they choose to do.
Great. I think actually that covers our next slide. I'm pretty sure the next one is what are EFAs? Yeah.
So we have,
you said, yeah, go ahead.
There's 2,000 families currently this school year using an Education Freedom Account, and what they do with it is as wild as your imagination. They can pay tuition at a school, they can choose a class or course, they can get technology. The way we see ourselves at Children's Scholarship Fund is we're really the guardrails and the gas for the family, right, to drive down their own education road. I mean, we're giving them the grant and we're just helping them to stay in the guidelines, but they're really the ones that are designing all of those learning experiences for their child. I watched someone post on Facebook the other day talking about their experience, and their child is taking a couple of classes in a school building. They're taking a couple of classes online. They use their EFA also to pay for the computer that they needed to do those online classes. And then they were also able to buy supplies for their child to do the online classes and the class in the building. They use the EFA also to pay for the classes in the building. So it's really the parent who's now saying, these are the different learning experiences that I want my child to participate in. And we just help them to find those experiences and then to cover the cost of those. And we have about 400 education providers that have signed on to date to the program. So it's super exciting.
Okay, so I have a question. How is it determined what those funds can be used for?
So in the law, they made a list of categories that you can use them on. And I could read them all to you, but they're pretty boring. They're what you can think of, okay? And then there's a list of core knowledge subjects that families agree to educate their kids in. And again, it's reading, writing, math, science. So as long as there's an intersection of the category and the core knowledge subject, then it's allowable. So it's educational expenses. It's the kind of things you could think of in your head, okay, right? You want to buy curriculum to teach your kid, you can buy the curriculum. You want to buy the computer to do an online class, you want to pay for the online class. You want to pay for AP classes. We just watched a child pay for AP classes at their area high school, but they weren't enrolled in the school, so they paid to take the AP classes.
Okay.
All right.
What about things like museums? Are museums covered? So
there isn't a field trip category. So it would depend on if that experience is tied to your curriculum or not. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's been really entertaining and fun adventure.
Our next question is, what are the homeschool laws like in New Hampshire? And Michelle, I think you can cover this pretty well.
Sure. Really, the homeschool laws in New Hampshire are very hands-off. It's minimal. And for folks that might be familiar with the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, HSLDA, they have New Hampshire listed as a moderately regulated state, but it's really so much easier in practice than it appears. And we had a major deregulation bill pass and signed into law in early June. So it's even easier and even better than it was before. But it's really very hands-off. People can keep a lot of stuff private, or they can interact with their local public school if they so choose. There are so many options. The laws are really very, very simple. It boils down to 3 components. Your initial notification when you choose to homeschool your child. And what I love about New Hampshire's requirement there is that it's the families are making a declarative statement. They're saying, this is my decision. There's no approval process. There's no getting permission from somebody else. It's you deciding and telling them, and that can be the only interaction you have with any of these officials if that's what you want. And there are private options if you don't even want to tell your local school or the Department of Ed. So you can keep things at a distance if that's what you want. So it has a lot of flexibility in there. The other requirement is to keep some kind of portfolio, which is a body of your child's work, samples from that, which frankly, I look back at what my kids did all those years ago, and it's like a trip down memory lane. It's kind of fun. So it's not that hard, and nobody else has to look at it, but you just keep those records to yourself. They're private. And then some sort of annual assessment, and there's a ton of flexibility in that too. And that's also an area that we deregulated this year. So it's even easier and acknowledges kids of all kinds of different learning abilities. So it's a very flexible requirement, easy to do, and not intrusive. So I think that makes it a very friendly homeschool state.
Yeah,
Well,
I am.
Michelle, I've also watched you help families with that and advocate for them. There's been some instances where people have tried to overregulate homeschoolers in New Hampshire, and I know that Michelle has helped them personally herself to overcome some of those barriers where, a participating agency where the people file their paperwork might say like, oh no, you have to do X, Y, Z. And Michelle and her group, the Granite State Home Educators, will step up to the plate and help a family in that circumstance to be able to navigate those kinds of waters. So
yeah, I always see her online on the groups commenting on people's posts. What's required? What is the state allowed to know? Sometimes parents get questions like, oh, are you going to continue homeschooling this year? And she's quick to be online and say, no, you don't have to respond to those types of questions at all.
Yeah,
we
work really hard at empowering parents with so they know what is required and what's not required, and putting that information in their hands so that overreaching districts or other officials can't take advantage of that. And if parents need help, we are happy to step in, and almost always are able to get some sort of resolution before we have to really get a little bit more assertive in it. Usually we solve it pretty directly.
Becky, do you mind giving a little bit of an overview of what a portfolio looks like for your family?
Sure. So I have one who just finished 2nd grade and one who just finished 1st grade. So I've now made 3 portfolios because kindergarten in New Hampshire is not required. So you can do kindergarten however you want, but you don't have to tell anyone that you're homeschooling until your child is 1st grade age. And so the portfolios, we're doing a pretty usual calendar year. So we did them last month in June, at the end of our school year. We have in our community, Prax Village, we happen to have a certified teacher with a New Hampshire teaching credential who's a mom, a homeschooling mom in our group. So one perk that we offer to the people in our community is to schedule at the center through her so that they can come. I would provide childcare for the other siblings and they meet with her. So half an hour to an hour, sit down with a teacher and the child can be there or not, that's up to you, and just kind of go through what they've done through the year. So normally for each subject, if they were working through a workbook, I kind of like mark a page, like a good example page for the beginning, middle, and end of the year to show their progress. And then I made like a nice little list of just so I could remember mostly like the sports and the extracurriculars that they've done. And then you do have to do a reading list, and that can be, I don't know if there's anything that says it has to be complete. I think that's sort of impossible with how much kids read and get read to throughout the year. But I would just add to those as we read throughout the year. So they each had a reading list. And then photos are great to keep in there. I just bring my computer, like last year when my son was learning to read, I took some short videos of him reading every couple months so that you could hear the progress of how he was reading aloud more and more fluently. And then the mom who was, going over the portfolios with us, we see her already and her family multiple times a week. So in her letter that she gave back to us that said, here's all the things they did, she even got to add some things that I forgot because she was there for them too. So that's really awesome in that community to be able to have a teacher who knows us so well, but it is easy to find a teacher even if you're starting to homeschool and you don't know somebody who is really familiar with homeschoolers of all kinds, including unschoolers, and is happy to have you explain and show how your kid has been making progress throughout the year, even if it's sort of in an unconventional way. So it's an easy and fun process.
And Michelle has a list of evaluators, right, Michelle? On your website, there's a list of homeschool evaluators right there.
Yep. So to be an evaluator in New Hampshire, the individual needs to have New Hampshire teaching credentials or one from a state with reciprocity, or be currently teaching in one of New Hampshire's private schools. And so we have an extensive list of people that are willing and able to provide these evaluations. And I make sure that they are familiar with New Hampshire's laws, and that that the families do not need to replicate public school at home. So I kind of pre-screen them a little bit to make sure that they have the right understanding of what homeschooling is like in the state before I even put them on my list.
And no one is ever saying that your child needs to be showing a second grade level because they're at second grade. You just need to show that your child has learned throughout the year and made progress throughout the year.
And that's actually one of the things that we changed with the legislation this year. So the requirement before just said age and ability. Now it says age, ability, and or disability. And we had that changed because there is so much increase with children with special needs who are turning to home education. And we wanted to make sure we had that kind of recognition that kids learn at different rates. It's not a one size fits all, even in homeschooling, and kids can be at whatever level is appropriate for them. And it can be different levels and different subjects. So this way they have that expressly protected in statute now.
Yeah, the inclusivity of the homeschoolers in our state is just amazing. They welcome everyone. And it's so refreshing to see parents with kids who are special needs turn to homeschooling and see that they can help their kid. They can teach their kid the way that works the best for their child. What requirements do homeschoolers have to meet? So we kind of covered that a little bit about the portfolio. And I think we also touched on it when you said you have to show progress, but that doesn't have to look like public schooling.
Nope.
Next slide is, can homeschoolers participate in activities at the local school?
Yes, in fact, we call that shorthand the equal access law. And it allows not just homeschoolers, but students in charter schools or private schools to participate at their local public schools for curricular or co-curricular programs. So that means your child could try out for a sports team. Doesn't guarantee them a spot, but they can try out. They can audition for the play. They can participate in band. They can be on the track team or robotics team. They can be in the classes with other kids. They can do scouts. They can go just for art or whatever they want. At the upper level, I know a lot of parents sometimes are intimidated to try world languages or the lab sciences. So that's okay. You can plug into the resources at your local public school for social or academic purposes. But the beauty of such a robust homeschool community is that that's not the only way to get that kind of experience. We have so many resources here around the state that parents are able to even form their own little learning groups, whether it's to have all the kids learn, maybe they're all taking the same online class together, and it can be a inclusive little study group as they do that, or they form pretty extensive co-ops where, one mom might teach math, a dad might be teaching something else. They might pull in a expert in the area for another subject, and they meet on a regular basis to do that together. So there's a lot of different ways families can plug in to get all those activities and academics in group settings, not just by themselves, because homeschooling is not just at home. It's nothing like remote learning that parents had to deal with during COVID. So it's so many vibrant opportunities. It's almost overwhelming to try to sort through how much there is that you can do even as a homeschooler. The whole world is their classroom.
Yeah, do we have any questions?
Yeah, there is a question. Are standardized tests required at any level or grade?
Nope. You can take a standardized test as one of your annual assessment options, but you don't have to. And you can choose from any standardized test that you want, and those results remain private if you choose that. If you don't want to go for a test, you can do as Becky did and have your child's portfolio reviewed by a teacher of your choice. And this is another wonderful thing about New Hampshire's statutes, that if those aren't what you want to do, there's this open-ended other category for the annual assessment. So you can have something else that shows your child's progress, so long as it's agreed upon with the agency that you sent your notification to. So you could come up with something else that demonstrates your child's progress for the year. And so by no means, you're not stuck with testing all the time.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And your portfolio review also stays private.
Yep.
So nothing that you do at the end of the year will ever be seen by anyone else unless it's called into question somehow, which is probably exceedingly rare.
Were there any more questions, Amy?
Yeah, I have another question here in the chat. So what areas are best for homeschoolers?
I have found homeschoolers everywhere, and it pretty much follows the population of New Hampshire. So you get further and further north, there are just fewer people, so there are fewer homeschoolers. But New Hampshire has vibrant communities in the Upper Valley area. Seacoast has oodles and oodles of families and groups. Southern New Hampshire has tons and tons of people and resources there. So I would say it pretty much just follows the other population. And so, you know, you go to a bigger community, you'll find more homeschoolers. You go to a more remote area, there'll be fewer. So but homeschoolers are everywhere in the state.
Yeah, I've lived in Keene, Northfield, Grafton, and now Manchester, and I've never had an issue finding homeschoolers to connect with.
Yeah, it's almost overwhelming how many homeschoolers there are on the seacoast. Yes.
Yeah.
You know, you run into them everywhere. You're always meeting new people. You know, you go to a park or anywhere on a weekday and there's another new family. You think, like, I've been in so many groups for so long now doing different meetups and stuff. I think I kind of know all the homeschoolers, but can never know all the homeschoolers.
And if you find yourself in an area where you feel like there aren't any homeschoolers, you can create events, start groups, and you'll find them. They will find you.
Yep.
What's the difference between co-ops and charter schools? We covered it a little bit, but if we could just touch on it again in case some of the people weren't
Sure.
online yet.
Well, Kate gave a great description about what a charter school is. So in New Hampshire, all of the charters, and there's approximately 30, is that right, Kate? About 30 of them. And growing. Charter schools in New Hampshire are all part of the public education system. So charters are tuition free because they're paid through tax dollars. There's no additional tuition fee. They are non-discriminatory for enrollment and hiring, but they're able to do their own version of the public school state standards, and the students are given the required statewide assessment testing. But charter schools can approach that in their own unique way, whether it's classical education, an arts background. There's a bunch of STEM schools. There are ones that are project driven, so they can mix up how they approach it, but fundamentally they are still public schools. Whereas co-ops are part of the homeschool program. They can be drop-off full-time programs, and there are several of them around, or they can be a la carte classes where you can pick and choose what your child is enrolled in for group learning. And then there are also family-based co-ops where families, you know, might share teaching responsibilities and rotate locations, but have their kids meet up on some regular basis for both social and educational opportunities. It's pretty much whatever you come up with, it'll be around or available to you.
And I just want to drop something in here because there's kind of a fusion thing going on too. There's people starting these learning pods, and they kind of look like micro schools for all intents and purposes. So for example, I just talked to a group who's working in a school in Berlin-Gorham area, but they don't have high school there, but they're starting a learning pod for their high schoolers. The high schoolers are going to do a homeschool curriculum, but they're all going to be together while they do it. And we also have those Prenda pods popping up in New Hampshire where those people are choosing Prenda, which is an online platform and curriculum, but they're doing them in these small groups of students, usually, you know, less than 10, maybe 5 to 10. And they're all using those learning pods instead of really a school building or a co-op. So that's kind of a fun thing that's happening right now.
My kids go to Latitude, which is a co-op that is a drop-off, and it's all day. And they have, I believe this fall, they're going to have classes Monday through Friday, but they may just do Monday through Thursdays. And that's really awesome because it's great for parents who work full-time, who still want to have that flexibility without getting a public school involved or a charter school.
And those are those are popping up all over.
Yeah, there's another one that just opened up in the Ware area, I think, Granite Mines Homeschooling.
Yeah, and there was another one in the Seacoast also. They just stopped operating, but there's a lot of movement towards that place of, there's a couple in the North Country also, of creating what looks like a learning center where you can either choose a class or a course or go for the day. It's really neat to see that happen.
Acton Academy has 2 locations in the state. I believe it's Laconia, if I think
You're
that's right,
Dover.
and Dover. And those are 2 other full-time programs that are available to families.
All right. Are there any questions?
Not right now.
Okay, we'll move on then. What is the difference between a private school and a charter school?
Yeah, we hit that pretty good. I mean, a charter school is a public school. So there's an interesting way to think about it, okay? And I'll put it in terms of this new education freedom account, okay? So the state adequacy money, which is that state grant for your child's education, used to go only to your area public school, right? Geographically assigned public school or a charter school, right? Again, a charter school is public school, and it was funded by that same money, your state education dollars, just the state piece, following your child basically from your public school to the charter school. Now that money also can go into your education freedom account for you to use. Okay, so that's kind of how you can understand all the differences. I mean, private schools are just that, you know, private nonprofit organizations that run schools. Charter schools are public schools. The way they get established is by submitting to the State Board of Ed their charter and getting their charter approved. You know, they have independent school boards, like you might think of your school board in your town that runs your local schools in your district. Charter schools have their independent school boards that just run those schools. But they're all funded, your public schools and the charter schools, and now the education freedom account by that state education funding that otherwise used to just follow your children to the public schools or the charter schools, which are also public schools. Does that help?
Yes.
Good.
Yes, thank you. What's the best way to pick an area to move based on educational options?
A tough one, because I would pick an area where I could buy a house that was affordable so that I had money available to do whatever I needed to do for my kids. The hardest question I get asked is, what town should I move to for the schools? And kids are so different, right? That one size fits all that Michelle was talking about is not a talking point, right? That's reality, right? We know that. And so the challenge is when people say, you know, they want to move somewhere because of a school, you know, it could work for a year, and then the next year your child's totally different and you find you have to do something totally different. So I would say move to an area that gives you flexibility as a parent to do whatever kinds of things your child might need over the whole course of their life.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Like I had mentioned before, I've lived in a couple different places throughout the state. And while I did find homeschool communities in all those locations, they weren't all necessarily the best fit for me and my family and my kids. So now, like I said, we're in Manchester, and it's very convenient to drive, you know, 30, 40 minutes to find a variety of different homeschool cultures that meet our needs.
Right. It depends on what you're looking for. So, I mean, yes, you're right. Where the population densities are in New Hampshire is also where the formal opportunities might be, right? Like if you're talking about where should I move to have access to a whole bunches of school buildings, right? Then you would choose the living near the urban areas, because if you're looking for school buildings, right, that's where kind of all your, like I never have trouble helping a family in Manchester find a different school, right? There's plenty of schools to choose from here, public, private, and charter. And so when you're in the urban areas, there's usually a lot to choose from. I do see more families homeschooling or creating learning pods or doing kind of those out of the box things like taking an online class in more rural areas. I mean, we're lucky in New Hampshire that, again, they can get a scholarship or their education funding can follow them to do any kind of thing they can think of in those rural areas. So we do see people in the rural areas accessing school choice in New Hampshire and choosing different kinds of education options. But yes, if you're talking about school buildings, it can get challenging in some of our rural areas where finding an alternative building is a far drive.
I will say that if you're going to homeschool, you should move, like, kind of like what Kate said, find the house that you want. But we have had a few families looking around the state, trying to find where they would belong and come visit us at the Praxium in Dover. And if you're moving because you are, you know, trying to find a place with more freedom and libertarian ideals, then maybe you want to plug into a certain type of homeschooling community. And those are all over the state too, but we have a great one in Dover, and people have chosen to move to seek a house in the Seacoast after coming to our co-op and meeting some of our families and talking with the parents there, because, you know, even though the homeschooling families are out there, it's nice if you arrive and you can plug right in and your kids sort of have this built-in group of friends where they feel comfortable and they get folded right in. So the support is there in the Seacoast, and people drive, you know, some of the people drive up to an hour, but I would say most people are within 30 minutes of Dover, which is where we are. But anywhere in the Seacoast is really family friendly.
Yeah, actually what you were saying, you've helped solidify the confidence in people when they were looking to purchase a home in that area. We have sent them to the Prax Village and highly recommended that community. And once they get there and they meet you guys, they are very confident in their choice. They're like, yes, this is the right spot for us. This fits perfectly with our ideals.
Yeah, that's awesome. So a lot of us are movers, and there's lots of locals too, but a lot of us have been that new family before.
All right, we're gonna move on. Are there low tax towns with highly ranked schools? So I'm gonna touch a little bit on this. If you go to the website, porcupinerealestate.com, underneath the resources is a whole big description of low tax towns with good school systems. And also New Hampshire has a couple of public academies. So different towns like Auburn can take advantage of Pinkerton Academy, and they have a pretty low tax burden in Auburn compared to other towns like Derry. I think there's a few others. Jen, do you guys know anything about those?
So I can tell you where you can find all of if you want to look at schools rankings, the Department of Education does have a comprehensive system on their website where you can look up data about any school district in the entire state. And based on what you're looking for preferences in data, you can pull the data to see, you know, for example, if I want to know how many instances of bullying have been in this particular school, in this particular district, I mean, you can see it that level of granularity and transparency around the data. So if you were researching public school districts and you wanted to figure out a place that worked for you, you could find all the information on the Department of Education's website with great granularity in their reports section. It's actually an active dashboard that you can go to and look at all kinds of demographic information, the test scores, because, you know, test scores aren't the only thing that people think about when they're ranking schools. And so in particular for me, I like to look at that bullying information because that tells me a lot about the climate and culture at a school. And if I see very low instances of bullying, you might imagine that the children might be happier, right? And so there's all that data is available on the Department of Education's website with extreme transparency and granularity.
Wow, I didn't know that. I love the transparency. That's awesome. All right. Amy, are there any other questions?
Yeah, there's a question about what is the process for getting an EFA?
So you can go to our website. It's csfnewhampshire.org. The application is only open until July 15th. So if you're interested in that, if you have any inclination that you might want it, you should go now and do the application. It's on the apply page. So there's an apply drop-down box and you go and apply there on our website. You can always say no in September if you don't want it, but you would need to go now and apply. The entry point is any child who otherwise could go to a public school in New Hampshire, which is all the children. You have to meet income limits. The legislature put income limits on it, 300% of the poverty line or below. But if you go to the Education Freedom Account page of our website, again, which is in that apply drop-down box, you'll see that chart there. And so if someone has an inclination to getting one of those, they should go there right now.
Thanks. Amy, are there any other questions?
No, but I just wanted to clarify quickly that the link on our site is porcupinerealestate.com. And then if you click on the resources tab, there's a link to the New Hampshire relocation guide, which is where all the tax info is. So you can kind of compare that with the resource that Kate gave.
Thank you. All right, did you guys have anything else you wanted to talk about that I didn't ask questions for or didn't cover? No?
No, thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thank you guys. I feel really positive about this, and I hope it helps answer a lot of people's questions about educating in our state and helps solidify their choice to move to New Hampshire.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thanks, guys.